The Wise Man's Fear is actually the only, I was going to say, it's my second book in the my second favorite book in the KingKiller Chronicles, but there's just two books and a short story. This opening line doesn't work out as well as I hoped it would. However, I really don't hate this book. I actually think it's a 4.5 out of 5. In other words, it's one of my favorite books of all time. It would be top 20. It would not make it to the top 10, but it would still be top 20. I want to actually point out some of the problems I have with this book. In fact, these problems are what stopped this book from joining the top 10. First of all, a problem I had with the first book is that the entire time Kavoth spends in the college is actually a lot of just meandering. That does not seem to contribute a lot to the story. Of course, toward the end of the first book, we do see that, Ambrose is important to push Kavoth to do something very important and very cool. However, no spoilers in this video. I promise I'm not going to be an asshole like last time and just spoil everything. However, technically speaking, I want you to really pay attention to this, because my issue last time was that the book was not narratively efficient. That is not just worse in this book. It seems to have been exasperated 1,000 times. The entire book is just meander. You could literally cut out this entire book out of the trilogy. I believe when Doors of Stone comes out, if it ever comes out, I believe you could literally cut out the entirety of the second book and recap it in 2 sentences or maybe 2 pages, and that would literally be it. No one would notice. That's how irrelevant this book is. Kavoth ends up doing something I was yearning to happen in the first book, ever since he went to the university, which is leave the university. Of course, in the first book, he goes to this village called Terrebonne and he leaves the university. However, he comes back to it. Not my favorite thing ever. I didn't love that at all. He goes from in the second book, he goes away from the university, and technically what ends up happening is a lot of irrelevant stuff. Everything that happens when he leaves the university is completely irrelevant. I wanted him to leave the university so that important stuff and the story can be advanced. We can move toward the Nameless, because we're not gonna find the Nameless inside the university. We're going to find them away. And I'm reading the story for the Nameless, for the Chandrian, right? Or Chandrian, I have no idea, but some people call it the Chandrian, okay? So I'll just say the Chandrian. So I'm reading the story for the Chandrian, called the Nameless as well. That's the first priority. They are not at the university. They happen to not be there. If you leave the university, that is great. But if you leave it and then you're just banging any mythical babe you come across, it's not going to be fun. It's really not going to be engaging in any way whatsoever. And so the second book, even though it was beautifully written, as always, Patrick Rothfuss, even though the dialogue was amazing, the world building was even way better in this book, even though a lot of things I loved from the first book were here, I still found an urge to just, skip the page. Maybe I should skip it. Maybe there should be a reading guide for the irrelevant chapters of book 2. And then there is the next big problem with The Wise Man's Fear, and it is how, so clearly we know for a fact, and in fact you can notice this if you interact with the KingKiller Chronicle fandom, you will 100% unequivocally notice how Patrick Rothfuss knows how to ask questions, number 1. Number 2, Patrick Rothfuss knows how to make you care about the answers for those questions that he asks. In other words, he proposes a mystery and he writes the story such that you care about the mystery that has been proposed. But he's doing that mystery box BS, which is, ask a lot of questions, bombard the audience with a lot of mysteries, but there does not seem to be a lot of answers. I hoped in the second book we would at least have a good number of answers. We would have a better lead to who the Chandrians are, and we would have a lot more answers than in the first book. Of course, the first book, I did not really expect any answers. It's a trilogy. I'm very patient. In fact, I was very patient. But by the end of the second book, I was extremely disappointed. And so this is the second problem with Wise Man's Fear. It is the ending. The ending and the progression of the entire story does not reveal any of the mysteries. In fact, it makes me wonder more than is necessary. It asks more questions, which we don't need to. We just need to answer some of the questions that we have asked. This is a trilogy. Imagine, I cannot, in fact, for 1,000 times, imagine the third book, Doors of Stone. If it's 400,000 words and less, I cannot imagine all of these mysteries and all of these events that are happening, those things being recapped and brought together in 1,000 years. I really cannot. I am so convinced that I really do not think that all of this can happen in one more book. I think it needs to take place in 2 books. Maybe the third book is 2 books, part 1, part 2. But I just genuinely, this is why actually so many of the fandom seem to be wondering whether the third book will be the last book, because some people just cannot believe it will literally be recapped and concluded in a satisfying way in just one more book. So technically speaking, the third book, I doubt it's going to be able to answer all the questions. There's going to have to be a 4th book and maybe a 5th book. And that's how severe the situation is. There are too many questions asked in the 1st book and 2nd book and very few answers. So yeah, that is me criticizing my favorite books. This episode, the last episode, I think it was The Way of Kings. The one before that, it was A Game of Thrones. Now it is Wise Man's Fear, the 2nd book in the KingKiller Chronicles. Next, I don't know what it's going to be. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you took something from it. Have a nice day. Bye.